Try to remember, and if you remember, follow. So in 1974, I moved to New York City. And as a young 20-year-old moving to New York City, one of the most exciting shows that you wanted to audition for was The Fantastics, especially if you were this 20-year-old boy who thought he should be totally cast as the boy in The Fantastics. So I remember when I first got to New York, one of my first auditions was to go and audition for The Fantastics. Now, The Fantastics opened in 1960. So it had already been running for 14 years, and it was the longest running show in New York at the time. It ran, however, for 42 years. It is the longest running musical in the world in all of history. 42 years. Now, here's the joke. That's continuous. It then shut down for a few years and opened for another 13 years off Broadway in a different theater. So it's really actually 42, 52, 58 years it's run off Broadway. So Tom Jones and Harvey Schmidt, who wrote The Fantastics, they were like Broadway, literally Broadway legends. They were Broadway royalty. They'd written so many wonderful shows. In fact, they wrote a show called 110 in the Shade, which I had done in high school. So I knew who these guys were, and I was so enamored by who they were, but I'd never met them. I kept auditioning for the boy. I'd go in and I'd audition, and they kept telling me no. And at one point, one of them said to me, not the director, the stage manager who was holding the auditions, he said, here's the deal. He said, you're very sexy and you know a lot. You seem, what was the word he used? You're too self-aware. And I always took that as an insult. Not anymore. Now I like the idea that I was too sexy and I was too self-aware. Apparently, I couldn't play the young, innocent boy because I apparently was too self-aware. Let's go with that. So almost 20 years later, now I want to tell you, the title of my talk today is Follow. There you go. That's the title of my talk, Follow. And it's really cool that I've never really understood this song until today, until this week, as I was going through it. Almost 20 years after that audition in New York, trying to get to play the boy, which I never did, I went into another audition for a role in a new Tom Jones, Harvey Schmidt musical. Now, I'd never met them other than when I would audition, and you don't really get to talk to them. They sit in the back, and you sing, and they say thank you, and if you get the part, you meet them. So I went in and I auditioned for this role, and they cast me. So I got to star in one of their next musicals, which is this, Colette Collage. Now, I apologize for the sexiness of this picture, but I just wanted to prove the point. That's why I didn't play the boy, because they were waiting for me to turn into a man. And then they gave me this fabulous role in Colette Collage, and this is Betsy Joslin, who had been the star of Sweeney Todd on Broadway. Anyway, so now, why am I telling you all of this? Well, I really want to make a point about our memories, because 9 years later, even after this, Tom Jones and Harvey Schmidt hired me again to star in a brand new musical, a big production of the Goodspeed Opera House. And that's the next slide, Thor. So this is me 9 years later starring in their next musical, Mirette, about the great Bellini, who I played, the greatest tightrope walker in the world, teaching this little girl who had just played Annie, can't you tell, to walk a tightrope. So why am I telling you these stories? Well, our theme this month is Remember Who You Are. It's about memories. It's about remembering who you are. And with the title of my talk being Follow, one of the things that I always ask myself is, what does he mean by this? Try to remember this, try to remember that, and then follow, and then follow. Try to remember the kind of September when you were a tender and callow fellow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow. In 1996, Tom Jones and Harvey Schmidt gave me the greatest gift, which was to give me the rights to direct and choreograph a huge national tour of the Fantastics with the stars of Greater Tuna. And it was one of my greatest accomplishments, and I loved doing it so much. But one of the best parts of it was that I got to do it with my husband, who starred as El Gallo. And that is Jolie Jenkins, who plays the girl. And the reason I have these pictures is because the other night, Tom Jones, producer, sent me all these pictures of shows we had done. And Kevin and I were looking through the pictures, and Kevin saw this picture, and he said, "Oh my God, I was so handsome." To which I, of course, then said, "Honey, you're still handsome." But he said something that is perfect for this talk. He said, "Isn't it funny? I never thought of myself as handsome back then. But when I look back on it, I mean, no one can look at this picture and not say, that is a hunk of a leading man on that picture." And it's funny how in retrospect, we go back and look at memories and assign it things that at the time we perhaps didn't feel, didn't think about ourselves. So I got to direct this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful production of The Fantastics. But I also got to work with Harvey and Tom in a different way. I got to sit with Harvey when we were going over the opening. And he told me the story about Try to Remember, how they had this whole musical written, but they didn't have an opening number. And he tried for weeks just trying to write this opening number and trying to make it happen, make it come out of him. He said, and then in like 20 minutes one day, the entire song came through his fingers. And he just played Try to Remember. So I asked Harvey, I said, can you just tell me, so as I'm working with Kevin, can you just tell me what the word follow means? Why is that in there? And what he said was this. He said, well, you can go to the next slide, the title. Oh, isn't it the title of my talk? Whatever the title is, follow. He said, I always meant it to be, try to remember, and if you remember, if you take all of your life's story, if you remember it all, follow the story. Tell your story. That was his idea. And it made sense for the opening of the show, for Kevin to be standing there and singing to the whole audience, remember this, remember that, follow us as we tell you this story. I never really was fully committed to that version of what Harvey said, even though he did read it. We tend to think that things we remember are things perhaps that we've lost behind us. We tend to think, and this song is very melancholy, we tend to think that all of this stuff back here are just memories. That picture of Kevin was just a memory of a day in a photo shoot, I believe, in Washington. You know, or mine, photo shoots in Connecticut, or actually a live picture in Connecticut. Are these things we have lost? Are they I heard Kevin when he said, God, I was so handsome. I've said that 1,000 times. How many of you have looked at a picture and said, oh my God, look how young I was. Look how beautiful I was. Look how ... Just because it was 20, 40 years ago, does that mean it's not fully present right now? Kind of like Eric was talking about, the time thing. Does it mean that these are lost memories, or these are just things in our past? Or is it possible that if I am in right relationship, if I remember who I am, and I'm in right relationship to everything. I think of that gorgeous picture of Tiffany on her wedding day. I don't know why I remembered that just now, that picture of you with your dad on your wedding day. You know, that's a gorgeous moment back here, but it's also sitting right there in that seat where Tiffany is. All of these memories, all of what we have brought forward, our stories. That's what follow means to me, being in right relationship to our history. So I'm teaching this advanced consciousness class on Thursday nights, and it is like the central figure of my week because I have to build up to it, then I actually have to endure the 3 hours of it with the students and go through, and I'm joking, of course, because I love it, but to go through this advanced quantum consciousness about what life is. But this week I asked a question at the end of the class, and I said, how are you going to take what we've talked about tonight and incorporate it into your world? Because if we're only just learning this stuff and not living it, what's the point? I could spend a better 3 hours on a Thursday night. was fascinating listening to every student's answer of what they got. But one of the things that came up was this idea of God and the idea of God's will. Well, you all know that what we understand as God is this energy, this creative energy. And God's will would be the will of that energy, which is always to evolve us, always to grow us. We are in this energized field of quantum particles that are constantly expanding and growing. It's moving me at all times. That's what creativity does. Now I have choice. If I have choice, I can slow it down in my acceptance of it. I can't slow down what it's doing. But I can certainly make my experience of it not be top-notch if I want. So I want to read you something. Amit Goswami, he wrote this. This is the book we're reading, the Everything Answer book. He says, is there any reason to presuppose that God's will is different from our will as human beings? Is there any reason for us to think that God's will is different from our will as human beings? And then instantly he says, no. In creativity, we synchronize with God's will. In creativity, we synchronize with God's will. What does that mean? It means that all I am is a creative essence on this plane of action. That's all I am is creativity. When I am in my creativity, when I was walking on that tightrope, when I was singing and dancing on a stage, I was right there in the midst of my creativity. When I sit at my computer, when Margaret sits at her piano, when Tiffany sits at her computer and writes something just for herself, when Eric writes his scripts, we are in our creativity. When Kevin gets up here and sings Try to Remember with so much passion and so much truth, that is this creativity that we are. And when we are in that level of consciousness, we are in what he calls in the book, we are in the flow or the zone. We are in the flow. And in fact, he calls it the flow experience. The creative self is the flow experience. So going back to follow, it is time for me anyway to start realizing that the creative flow of my life is not predicated on the jobs I got, the shows I did, the songs I wrote, or the dances I choreographed, or any of it. There is a creative flow in your life that is non-stop. It is continual. It is forward momentum. It is always bringing the highest and best to you and through you, which means, when Kevin sat up here singing Try to Remember, I watched and felt everything he sang. I wasn't trying to remember a time when he did this. It's right here, right now. I am everything that has come before me. My memories, remember who I am. We put a lot of focus on this idea of remember who I am. And as I said to Eric about the greatness, it's remember who I am. And then we seem to think there's something that's greater than what I am. There's something, when I'm this, I'm the best I can possibly be. When I remember that I am God, I'm in God. I am God even when I don't remember. I don't have to try to remember. I have to be willing to remember exactly that everything that has come before me is mine to then follow forward with. And so when I hear the word follow now, and the last verse of this song, deep in December, here we are, middle of December, deep in December, it's nice to remember, although you know the snow will follow. I'm working on snow on my head. It should be snow in a few years, because my son tells me all the time, pepper's going. It's mostly salt. So this is what I say, deep in December, it's nice to remember, although you know the snow will follow, you're going to get older, you're going to grow. But all of this, I can still take a picture and show you the exact same chest. Happy to say. I can still be every single thing I was. I can still walk a tightrope. I could still probably do that show, although he'd be a much older Bellini. But this whole thing that came before me, all of my memories, my past, every experience, did I create them or did I allow them? And that's the word. I come to understand now, I allowed them. I allowed this creative energy that is constantly driving me forward, constantly moving. I allowed it to bring this into existence, this into existence. And many times I stopped it. I hindered it. I got in the way. I let my bloated ego nothingness to get in the way of something that may have wanted to go. But you know what happens with that? When this creative energy just keeps going, you block it and it goes, okay, and we just go this way. And maybe you have to do a little workaround. That's how it goes. So when I'm talking about follow today, it's not after try to remember. When I remember who I am, I can allow myself to follow this amazing energy, this amazing evolutionary energy. And that's what I took away from our Thursday night class. Because after everybody spoke 3 hours after taking this chapter and really taking it to the deepest levels possible for all of us at that time, once everybody ended telling me what they got and how they were going to use it, I realized that I still had a little bit of duality going on. I still had a little bit of, I am God. And even as I say it, it's like, I am God. There's a highest part of me. No. If I am God, it's all part of me. Your memories, everything. They're not in the past. You have not lost them. They're not something you look back on. It's all of what you are. Good, bad, or indifferent. And I think we have to stop saying it's bad, as Eric was talking about. This isn't bad. This is part of the evolution. Deep in December, it's nice to remember without a hurt, the heart is hollow. Well, I've certainly had my amount of hurt in my life. But you know what? It also means my heart is broken wide open. I don't know that I could ever ask my heart to open any more than it already is, and yet I'm willing to let it open as wide as it can. Why? Because I'm willing to follow the energy. I'm willing to follow the evolutionary movement of who I am. And if I am the entire ocean in a drop, then I need to get in that ocean and let it throw me on the beach and pull me back in. I need to be willing to dive in, which is why I picked that song this week. I want to dive in deeper than I've ever been before, because I am the deepness. I am willing to follow. And what I love is, because I always asked Harvey, why do they have to sing follow 1,000 times? Because it's always like, deep in December, and follow. And then the girls, follow, 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 follow. I mean, it goes on forever. But it does go on forever. Now I'm okay with it. I could go direct to production and not try to cut some of those follows. Deep in December, it's nice to remember the fire of September that made us mellow. Deep in December, our hearts should remember and follow. So here we are in December. The theme is remember who you are. Remember, to remember. And I'd like to take the effort out of the try to remember. I'd like to actually remember who I am in such a way that I remember myself to be the follow. I am the follow. That's who you are. That's who I am. I am the great Bellini who walked a tightrope all those years ago. I am Maurice in Colette Collage, the gigolo who fell in love with Mademoiselle Colette and lived her last years out with her. I am Riff in West Side Story. I am all the things that I look back on and say, those were monumental moments in my life. I am that young minister who was introduced to a community 20 years ago. And I'm the minister right now, standing here, blowing everything I think I believe out of the water, questioning it all over again. Why? Because I'm willing to follow something. And what is that something? Well, frankly, it is God, my understanding of God. And it is God's will, the will of that energetic flow that constantly says, I have you. I am embracing you. I am moving you in the direction that is perfect for you. Now just follow. Follow, follow, follow. Now, I've always loved the fact that I never thought of myself as a follower. I was always a leader. I was not a follower. But now I really get it. Those who follow that which comes from within are the great leaders. They're the ones, you, all of us, we are the ones. When Margaret writes a song, that is her following her divine creative intuition and leading us to understand something. That's the creative impulse. That's who we get to be. So I invite you, as we go through the rest of this month, especially through the holidays and all, to really give it some thought. I want to ask you what I asked my students this week. What can you take from what we have done here today and use in your life this week? Can you feel it? Could you feel the energy that you are? Could you finally hand it over to something bigger than your critical thinking and allow life to live you? Could you possibly now be in right relationship to everything in your past, realizing it's all right here in your present and it's all being used for your highest good? And that means your relationship with you is in good accord, that who you know yourself to be, that you love yourself no matter what, right here, right now. If I am greatness on demand, that greatness isn't something far off or in the past. It is right here. Who I am, what I am, where I am now. So take whatever you get out of this day that we have just spent together and see what it can do for you. See where you can use it in your life. I can tell you for me, it has been a blast to go back and think about that little 20-year-old kid who showed up at the Sullivan Street Theater to audition for The Boy and the Fantastics the first time. And back in 1974, which was when that happened, there was a line around the block of all these 20-something-year-old boys all going in to sing, to play that role. And I remember standing there thinking, why not me? Oh, it's going to be me. I remember feeling this sense of, I can do this. And even when I was told, kind of you can't, and you won't, I kept going back. Something in me kept taking me back. But the irony was that I would still end up right where I wanted to be, in this creative mode of life. And I had many things happen between the time that 20-year-old showed up at that little theater in Greenwich Village and the one that landed on Broadway and the one that landed on a stage in North Hollywood and the one that brought me right here. They're all the same person. Same person. So if you look back and get melancholy or go, God, I wish, don't. It's right here. It's who we are. That's what I take away from all of this. That there is that in me that knows who it is. And if I am just willing to follow this constant forward momentum, my life, as you all know I say this, my life will continue to unfold perfectly. And so will yours. As soon as you remember who you are, and then what? Follow. Namaste.